Hello, good evening. Today I'm going to talk about literature review, which is relating to how people or how scholars and students need to do some literature review before they start their own research. Very, very important, whether that is this research is in translation studies or in any other kind of research that they are doing. Now, in the literature review, what are the ways, effective ways to actually, let me just show you, that actually produce a good and effective literature review. Now, of course, a faulty literature review can derail any any research project. So how to produce an effective review? First, how to keep on that track, that train track. You need a plan to avoid a flawed literature review. And the plan is, I'm just going to tell you what this is in my presentation. You need to have vital information for a high quality literature review. You need to see the purpose of the review, taxonomy of reviews, in other words, the number or types of reviews that are used usually. And then stages of conducting a literature review, maybe common mistakes, summary, and perhaps we can give you a sample in which we can apply these things. Why do theorists say, what do they say about literature review, theorists and scholars? Well, a literature review or a researcher has said that a researcher cannot perform significant research without first understanding the literature in the field. And that is what Booth and Bale in 2005 has said. So a researcher needs to do if they want to do significant research, they need first to understand what literature, what has been printed in the field, in the topic, and they need to understand that kind of articles and books that are published there. A second theorist said a poor conceptualized or written review often indicates that the rest of the research project might have problems if it is poorly researched. On encountering an inadequate literature review, examiners would proceed to look at the methods of data collection, the analysis, and the conclusions more carefully. And that's what Mullins and Kiley 2002 has said. Of course, you can see that they are focusing on the methods of data collection, the analysis, and the conclusion. Now, another theorist or scholar says many theorists say that many literature reviews in manuscripts submitted for publication in journals are flawed. That's 2003. And that is done by also in 2003 by Lecomte et al. And another researcher said most graduate students receive little or no formal training in how to analyze, synthesize the literature review in their field. So these are very important words, by the way, the word analyze and synthesize. I'll come back to that in a minute. Now, the ideal process when dealing with data is first, you need to collect the data, which means you are at the stage of being at the descriptive stage of your research, where you are describing what's the data that you have, and data, by the way, is plural, not singular, and you are collecting it. The second point that you need to do is to analyze that data. You see another word, analyze? And then you synthesize, you summarize that data, and finally you evaluate or assess or prescribe the data. In other words, you say, what do you think of it? Is it really useful or is it not really useful at all? Now, what's the aim of writing a literature review? According to Lecomte et al., 2003, he says it is to show the researcher's knowledge about a particular field of study. In other words, the researcher needs to show that the vocabulary needs to show the theories, needs to show the key variables, the phenomena, its methods, the methods of his field, or the history of that particular topic that he is or she is doing. Second element or aim is to inform current researcher or students of the influential researchers in the field. So in other words, the researcher is showing off who are the main influential researchers in the field in which they are working. And then finally, it is to get this paper published in a scholarly place. So now we have seen the vital information for high quality literature review, and we've seen that the purpose of the review is what it is. Let's have a look at what the purpose is. According to Goldberg and Gohl, 1996, they say that it is to delimit the problem. In other words, you need to see the edges of the problem, the limits, the sides, the margins of that problem. You need to find out a new inquiry, new line of inquiry, or you want to avoid fruitless approaches. You don't want to start something and find later on that it is useless what you are doing. Also, you might look into methodological insights. Maybe other people's methods may be insightful. Maybe they give you ideas. Or maybe you want to identify recommendations done by other researchers for further research before you. And finally, it might be to seek support for grounded theory. In other words, you are proving a theory that's already been, that you have already actually been read by many scholars, and you are going to prove it further. And that's the idea behind this last point here in this particular thing. With regards to the purpose of the review. Of course, there are further purposes and reasons for doing, like Hart in 1998, he says it's distinguishing, and watch this, it's distinguishing what has been done to or from what needs to be done. That is really, really very, very important. It's to distinguish what has been done from what needs to be done, what has been published in research in your topic before you've started doing that. Also, maybe you want to actually discover important variables relevant to your topic, or you want to synthesize and gain a new perspective or a new angle to your work, or you want to identify the difference between ideas and practices, because sometimes, and this is very, very important, sometimes the practices are different from theory. What is theoretically seen by all scholars where they are discussing a particular point or issue in your area, when you look at the practice, it's completely different. So maybe you need to see a relationship between theory and practice. This is yet another element which you can actually look in the literature review. There are still more in there as well, which is rationalizing the significance of the problem or identifying the main methodology used and research techniques. As you have seen, we've covered the purposes of the review. Now it's the taxonomy of reviews. In other words, types of reviews. According to Cooper 1988, he says that the review can be classified according to 5 categories: focus and goal, and then after that you have perspective. So you have focus, goal, perspective, coverage, and you need to also look at organization, how you want to organize your work, and then finally you're looking at the audience, and your audience are very, very important to be aware of them and aware of their needs and their requirements. Now, in terms of the taxonomy, we're going to look at one of them one by one,